Hey everybody, welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games, where we feed our people with relatable content and our victory condition is your satisfaction. I'm Harry. Before we go any further, don't forget to hit the subscribe button somewhere on the lower right hand side of your screen. That way we can move on with our lives and enjoy the rest of this video. Today I'm going to be doing another board game review. In particular, I'll be reviewing this game right here, Tower of Babel, designed by Reiner Knizia and published by Rio Grande Games. This is an area majority game, published in the mid-2000s, I think around the year 2005. And it's a game that absolutely nobody talks about it, flying completely under the radar. I'm going to set this game up, show you a little bit briefly how it plays, and then come back with my final thoughts and grades. So this is what the game looks like set up. I set it up particularly for 3 players. We have the green, blue, and red player with all their player pieces. So each player gets a bunch of building pieces which look like this, and there are some different size ones. You get about 5 of these bigger ones which represent 3 workers, right? Or you get a bunch of these smaller ones which just represent 1. These are the pieces that you're using to place on the board to represent your presence in the different spaces. Then you set up the 8 different wonders, some well-known ones like the pyramids, the hanging gardens, and you also got the Tower of Babel here, because if it would have been completed, it would have been the 8th wonder of the world. And each of these wonders has 3 little circles. You shuffle up these little tokens here, and these tokens have colors and symbols corresponding with the different matching colored cards from the player deck. And these basically represent your, I guess, your building resources, your building supplies, in order to actually construct and erect these different wonders. So you shuffle them up so that they're all random. There are numbers ranging from 3 to 6 on each of these tokens. I will explain those shortly. All right, so then you also hand a starting hand of 4 cards to each player, as well as one of these trading cards, which I will also explain shortly. Each player puts one of their player pieces on the 0 around the scoring track. You shuffle up these special bonus cards, which I will explain how you earn them and use them later on. Okay, so basically on a player's turn, we have this little area here to indicate the turn order. At the end of a player's turn, they just shuffle these up just to signify whose turn it is, just in case for whatever reason you're not going clockwise or counterclockwise or some other intuitive turn order. So on a player's turn, they're going to decide, he or she will decide, which wonder does he want to start working on, right? And basically, let's say I choose over here the hanging gardens. I choose one of these symbols. I might look at my cards and factor in the fact that I have 2 of these purple resource cards. So getting a purple might be doable. Early on in the game, each player only has 4 cards, so the economy is pretty weak. It's pretty low. So I might not want to pull out this 6. Instead, I might want to pull out this 3. And the reason why is because this number here indicates how many resource cards you're going to need in order to build the first stage, so to speak, of this wonder. And your teammates are actually going to collaborate in the process. So what you're going to do is you're going to choose one. Again, choose realistically, because you might have a waste of a turn. If you fail to successfully build a wonder, you will move on. So you grab one of these, you place it on top of your column here, just to indicate what is it that we are working for, because if you are able to successfully build this building, the active player will gain this token. And this is a little bit of set collection that's going on. So now the players all know that the active player is looking for purple resource cards. So each player looks at their own hand and figures whether or not they can offer anything. And this player, for example, has no purple cards. Now, each player will simultaneously, basically, more or less, the rules don't specify too much about sequence here, will simultaneously place an offer face down. So theoretically, you can place an offer that has no cards there. All those cards are just going to go back to your hand anyways, but it might allow the other players who are offering offers to think about being more generous or something along those lines. This player also has no purple cards. So let's say they also just put 3 to kind of show the idea of what would happen. And what happens is the players would simultaneously reveal the cards that they flipped up, and then the player would have to choose one of those resources. So for the sake of demonstrating what a turn would actually look like, I'm actually going to bypass this one right here, and I'm going to go as if it were this player's turn, the red player's turn, and I'm going to choose to go over here to this wonder and select the 3 of the white resource here. Because, so let's say I'm the red player here, because it's pretty cheap and the red player already has 2 white cards right there. So again, everybody would look at their hand of cards, simultaneously choose. This guy wants to be generous, so he will place these 2 cards face down. This person over here wants to be a little bit less generous. Well, they only have 1 to offer, but they're also going to place their trading card face down. And I'll explain what that means shortly. So now both players revealed their offers simultaneously. This player offered 2 of those resources, and this player offered 1. Now this player gets to choose who he or she wants to accept. So he can accept this person's offer of 2, which means he would only need 1 more card to contribute to the building cost of 3 for the first stage of this wonder. So this player will accept the offer of the green player, and now we'll have 3 cards to turn in to build this wonder. And what happens is, because the active player was able to successfully build the wonder, they will collect this token and keep it in their area. In the end of the game, there's a little bit of a set collection. Not only is this an area majority game, there's a set collection game going on where if you ever have 2 of a kind of any one of these tokens, you'll score 5 points for each of those sets that you have 2 of a kind of. If you ever have 3 of a kind, those 3 of a kind will score you 10 points. If you ever have 4 or more of the same color, they will score you 20 points at the end of the game. So that's a little bit of a game within the game, the set collection of these different tokens. Now, the active player gets to put buildings in this wonder equal to the amount of cards that he or she contributed. Contributed 1 card. So he gets to pick. He could put one of the bigger buildings, which represent 3 workers, or one of the smaller buildings, which represent 1. It's their choice. So let's just say they put the big building, which represents 3. Now, the green player, because the green player offered 2 cards to the active player, the green player gets to put 2 buildings in here. So you get rewarded for collaborating and assisting your opponent. So let's say the green player chooses to put one of the bigger buildings and also one of the smaller buildings. So now, currently, the green player has the majority in this area. Now, the blue player, their offer was denied. So what is interesting about this game is you have some sort of compensation, right? Because if a player denies your offer, because they have to accept only 1 offer, and they must accept the offer in full. You cannot accept someone's offer partially. So when you deny a player their offer, that player is allowed to score points equal to the amount of cards that he or she offered. So in the case of the blue player here, because the blue player offered 1 card, the blue player gets to advance 1 point in the score track. So again, it's a way of keeping things balanced, just in case people decide to play favorites, right? Sometimes if you offer enough cards, you can score a decent chunk of points, right? So there's that. Now, let's just imagine that the red player would have accepted the offer of the blue player. Not only would that have meant that the green player would have scored 2 points for the 2 cards that the green player offered and would have been denied, but it also means that there's a switch as far as the benefit is concerned. If the white player would have had accepted the blue or the red player would have accepted the blue player's offer, they would have had to contribute their 2 white cards, because they would have needed their 2 plus the blue's 1 to make a total of 3. But they would have been able to put all 3 buildings down for this phase. They would have gotten to put all 3 buildings. The blue player would not put down any buildings. Instead, the blue player's compensation would have been the building token itself. So throwing down this trading card is a nice, interesting way of compelling the player, if he or she so decides to accept your trade, forcing the player to basically cough up that token in order for you to get it. Maybe because you need to complete a set, or maybe because you're trying to prevent that player from completing a set. So that, again, is a very interesting little tug of war situation that will go throughout the game as players are vying not only for majorities in the different spaces, but also to collect these different sets of tokens. Now, let's just advance the game a little bit and add some random pieces here just to show what a game might look like. Right here. Now, let me show you what a scoring round looks like. The first time that one of these areas has the 3rd token removed, right? Let's say this is the third token claimed. That signals the completion of this wonder, and it triggers a scoring round. So once, let's say, the 3rd token is claimed by a player and it's built, we're going to look at the presence as a spot has. I'm actually going to choose another spot that might have all 3. Let's choose this spot right here. It has all 3 colors represented. Let's say that all 3 of these tokens have been claimed. Now this will trigger a scoring round. And what we'll do is we'll look at the scoring track and where this little house is, because the scoring progresses as the game advances. We're going to look at the scoring track, and we're going to look at the leftmost number here, an 8. And that means whoever has the majority in this wonder will score 8 points. Well, the red only has 1 building, but it's their 3 value building. The blue has 2 of the 1 value buildings, and the green only has 1. Therefore, the red has majority. Red would score 8 points for this location. The blue, with 2, would have the secondary. They would score the 2nd number along the column here, or along the row, I should say, and this would be 4. So the blue player would score 4 points for having secondary. And then finally, the green player would score 3, because any other player, whether you're playing a 4 or 5 player game, it doesn't matter if you're the third presence there, the third most majority present there. If you are in a location, you get 3 points, period, just for having any type of presence at that location. So that's what would happen. Then all the players would collect their building pieces back, which is very valuable, because as these building pieces start to dwindle down and you run thin on them, it makes your decisions a lot tougher as to what you're going to do. So you want to, trigger scoring rounds to get some of those pieces back. Now, at the end of this scoring round, what you do is you advance this house 1 space downward, so that the next scoring round is going to be a little bit more valuable than the previous one. The consolation prize will always be 3. However, first and secondary will have higher and higher dividends. Now, at the end of the game, any incomplete region or wonder here is going to score this amount right here, highlighted by this little row that's in white. This is letting you know that at the end of the game, every wonder that remained incomplete will score at this level. 10 points for first, 5 points for second, and 3 points for anyone else who is at that location. So this is interesting because as the game progresses, you're going to want to time your scoring rounds, ideally when it's most convenient for you to score more points, but at the same time, you don't want to leave points on the table by waiting too long to pull some triggers. And again, if scoring rounds don't happen, it's very possible that your supply of buildings is running low. So that is really, really cool. Okay, so at the end, the end game is triggered when all of the tokens of one type have been claimed. So as soon as a player claims the last token of a specific color, that triggers the end of the game, And again, we will score all the incomplete regions according to this row right here. Then players will add all their tracks, all their sets of these different tokens. Again, a pair gives you 5 points, 3 of a kind gives you 10, 4 of a kind or more gives you 20. Players will add all those points together with their incomplete wonders and where they have the majority secondary or third presence there. And finally, out of the points, and whoever has the most points is the winner of the game. Very important thing I forgot to mention is at the end of each scoring round, whoever triggered the scoring round, whether or not they were the majority in that location or not, they're going to draw one of these special action cards that give you special benefits that you could trigger at any point whenever you want. It allows you to discard 5 building cards from your hand and draw the same number. Some allow you to draw 3. Some allow you to have, 2 turns in a row. Some give you 5 secret victory points that nobody knows about. And these, again, can be very helpful. And that is pretty much how the game plays. Let's get back to my final thoughts and grades. So what are my final thoughts about this game here, Tower of Babel? Well, first of all, keep in consideration my biases. I am a big Reiner Knizia fan, and I am a big area majority, area control fan. So factor that into all of my comments. But first of all, I'm going to talk about its components. And I'm going to be generous, considering this is talking about 2005, 15 years ago. And I'm going to give it a B-. The components are functional. The cards are very mediocre. The board is plain looking. The graphic design is very plain and boring. The tokens are mediocre at best, but I do think it has some nice little chunky building pieces, which are basically your workers or your, pieces that you're placing to claim majority in these different places. So I think that part of the game is nice and neat. Some nice chunky, columns that are used to indicate turn order. So I will give this a B- for components. For theme, I'm going to give it a C-. And again, I'm being generous. I've been a little bit harsh on Reiner Knizia's games as far as their thematic integration. I think it's neat that, players are collaborating and working together to build these different edifices, these different wonders, because at the end of the day, none of these jobs could have been done alone, right? People need help and, assistance from neighbors and so on and so forth in order to be able to erect these wonders. So I'm going to give it a C- because of that. Gameplay. As far as gameplay is concerned, I'm going to give this a solid B. Again, I am an area majority fan, but I like the way that the area majority is implemented in this game. I like the fact that there are 8 different, regions to vie for control over. I like the fact that, you have some way of manipulating the situation as to how much of a lead you allow your opponents to get in a certain location, right? Most area majority games, you have control over your presence in that location. This game gives you a little bit more control over your opponent's presence in these different locations. I find that to be a neat implementation of the area majority mechanism. Then let's talk about the innovative factor, how innovative this game is, right? I'm going to give this an actual A-. And while it's not by any stretch of the imagination the first worker placement game, I should say the first area majority game that had come about 10 years prior to this with Wolfgang Kramer's El Grande. And there's been several iterations or several attempts at area majority, successful attempts and unsuccessful attempts alike, ever since until this day. However, while it's not innovative in that sense, I do feel that it added a few interesting nuances to this idea. First of all, the collaborative nature of the area majority, how we are working together to help each other get a presence in these different wonders, right? And sometimes conceding the majority to another player in order for you to secure the secondary spot in that location. I think that's cool. Most area majorities, games are, separate. Everybody's a separate entity. There is no collaboration. And, I declare my presence on my turn and you declare your presence on your turn. I think it's neat that on another player's turn, you can get a presence on a particular location. Also, the set collection that's involved in this game, right? You're collecting a set of different tokens that are gonna cumulatively score you points at the end of the game. That's neat. And the tension and balance between, the area majority and the set collection, because while the area majority on surface level looks like, the most important part of the game, and it really is, the set collection in certain cases can add lots of points to a player's total if the other players, neglect to address that. So again, finding that right balance of having area majority but collecting some of these sets to add to your point total at the end of the game, I think is a very neat balancing factor in this game. Also, the fact that the different locations or the different wonders that you're constructing throughout the game, the fact that the scoring, increases not by location but by progression. Most area majority games, you're finding the location on the board that is most optimal as far as getting you points. It's inherent in the actual location, some way, somehow, whether it's a modular board or it's a fixed board with a certain amount of points written on it. But the point is, the location in and of itself determines how much you score. I love the fact that in this game, it's the progression of the game that determines how much a location is worth, because as you score a majority in a location, you advance the scoring marker down a column of, a column of scores. You advance it to the next row, and now the next area that gets scored is going to be scored at a higher point level than the previous one. So it's not about where you are on the board. Intrinsically, no one spot is worth more than the other spots. However, if you time and trigger a scoring round at the right time, that could be very beneficial to you, right? You need to know that, first of all incomplete locations are going to get scored at the end of the game, but at a much lower scoring level. So that's something you want to factor in. If you feel like you're going to win some of those areas, you might want to pull the trigger and find a way to complete them before the game ends. And then sometimes you might not want to pull the trigger too early because you have a clear lead in a location. Why trigger the scoring of that location if right now the scoring marker is on one of the lower levels? Perhaps you want to wait a few more scoring rounds and then trigger that scoring round so you could score at a higher level for that location because you feel very confident and secure that you have the majority in that area with tons of workers there. However, there is the fact that you have a limited supply of workers and they might be there, and that may be keeping you from being able to invest in other spots. So you don't want to push too far as that's concerned. Eventually, you want to get your supply back into your hand so that you can use them as well. So again, I find that to be a little bit neat that the progression of the game determines how much a location is worth. And then finally, my overall score for this game, how do I feel about it being objective? I'm going to give it a B+. The obscurity of this game tempts me to give it a higher grade, right? The fact that nobody talks about it and that it's much better than its box cover would indicate, than its artwork would indicate, than its renown would indicate, because nobody knows about this game. But I found this to be a very enjoyable game, and so did the people I played with. I played with my friend Andrew, my wife Lily, and we played 2 games in a row, and it was late night on a weeknight. And, quite often late night on a weeknight, my wife will not recommend that we play a game 2 times in a row, but she, along with Andrew and I, all agreed that game needed to get played a second time in a row because we had such a good time playing it. So this game has had a good impression on me, but I'm going to give it a B+ overall, just trying to be objective because, things like components and theme, they do play a factor into gaming. And if I would have been very hyped about this game and going into it and playing it, I may have been a little bit disappointed. But again, because it's an under-the-radar type of game, instead I walk out with an excited, elated feeling, discovering this hidden gem. So objectively speaking, I'm going to say it's a B+. I feel like if you can look past components, if you can look past the abstract nature of the area majority here, there's a good game waiting here for you. And if you like area majority and area control, and you're looking for a game to add to your collection with regard to that mechanism, this is a good game to give a try to. Well, that's it for my board game review of Tower of Babel by Dr. Reiner Knizia. Thank you so much for joining us here at When Harry Met Board Games. I'm Harry. Please comment down below. Tell me what you think about this game, what you think about what you saw. Are you interested in this game, or is it a pass? Comment down below, hit the like button, subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.